I'd like to thank the organizers, Domenico and Guido Montani, for this conference. And I'm glad to see this proposal from my friend Chris Hammer of Australia. I should say I have seen the written reports. I've seen the written reports of both the Hammer and Ivor Strauss, and I would think that for forming our minds about this great question, we should all look at their studies, as well as these three parts of the proposal by us. I wonder if I'm on the screen. I see Domenico's on my screen, and am I in view?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, first of all, it is true that it appears that Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris have won the election here in the States. And this is, as Mr. Hammer said, is absolutely vital for the success of our project. And I actually had missed the Biden's article in Foreign Affairs. That would be another important paper for us. Now, it seems to me that our objective is to put together a tightly worded proposal that would reach the Quai d'Orsay of France and then to President Macron. So what we're trying to do is to move ahead this process that was once quite active in NATO with the Partnership for Peace. This has gotten derailed since the attempt to bring in Ukraine and Georgia into NATO by 2008. Now, the great difficulty, it seems to me, is to put together the statesmanship or the diplomacy that would change the very degraded relationships nowadays between the West and Russia. The question is Russia now under Vladimir Putin an aggressor state? Now, I quoted Putin, especially in his February 2014 address justifying the taking of Crimea. I have come to take the view that really we need to undo this view of Russia as an aggressor, that is repeated again and again in the press. It has led to the sanctions against Russia, and we have to undo this. This is what is so difficult. I think that President Macron of France has many devices that he could use, and I certainly think we should encourage him. Now, I'm a historian, and I tend to understand things historically, and I noticed that Mr. Putin was not feared as an aggressor until he began to militarily resist further NATO expansion, especially over Ukraine and Georgia by 2008. Before that time, the United States seemed to have a rather enlightened view of future relations and did indeed conduct a policy of encouragement to widen NATO to include Russia with the Partnership for Peace. And that's what, and somehow I would hope that America could begin to lead, or if not America under Biden, why Europe under Macron, or perhaps, well, I was going to say Poland or Germany I'm really not that close to the scene there in Europe, and you must decide what we might best suggest. The great problem is that we in the United States and our allies seem not to believe that Russia has a supreme security interest. That's what's behind her resistance to further NATO expansion. And it reminds me of the inability of the United States and its allies at the beginning of the Cold War in 1945-47. We just couldn't believe that Stalin really was concerned with the security of his country, but rather we assumed that the Communist Party was on a course of aggression in accordance with its dreams of world workers' revolution. But the Communist Party today is not a major factor in our relations with Russia. And I don't think the prospects of a world revolution, as Lenin preached, is still part of the story. Mr. Putin is mainly concerned with his national security. I often go back to Mikhail Gorbachev for a Russian view that it turns out is rather supportive of Putin, particularly in Crimea, and I quoted him in my paper. So what we need to do is to begin to respect Russia as a deserving and useful partner in the future. And the symbol of this new relationship is Gorbachev's vision of a common European home. I do think this is the model for practical policy in Central and Eastern Europe. How can we convince France to start with, and maybe Britain and or the United States in turn, that this is something seriously to work for? So the practical politics, it seems to me, is more immediate than what Chris Hammer was proposing, but it could be a step to it. I might I noticed that we use some sources. Professor Montani used a work by Menon and Rouger, another work that everybody should know, NATO enlargement and U.S. grand strategy. Now, Menon and Rouget do not really think that NATO could create this common European home. They think that the European Union is the more adequate core. And this matter is something that is open to debate. I followed another author, Henrik Larsson, and Larsson Larsson just doesn't think that NATO can be changed. It has ruined the opportunities in the East. So the third alternative would be the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And Larsson's view is that the OSCE is too weak. It is not based on a treaty. The United States is part of it, but it's not a partner to a treaty. And the European Union, Larsson regards as too slow. And indeed, for Italy and for you scholars there, so close to the scene, I have to just wonder if the European Union could begin to acquire a defensive capability and maybe in the absence of US leadership, and thus hasten this process of developing a respect for Russian security and moving ahead to something like a working regional collective security organization. So I think that's basically what I have to say. It'd be good to receive questions from the many excellent participants that I see in the background.